Chapter 13. Are we ready? A letter and another. It seems to me, said Granny Jane afterward, that Mr. Roddy Fusswell is similar in temperament to little Bertie Cummings, who lived down my road when I was a girl. Bertie waited for the braver boys to climb the vicarage wall and sneak out with their pockets full of plums. When he managed to cage one, he'd make a great show of munching it in front of the rest of us, as proof of great naughtiness on his part. I thought it a particular notion that someone might pretend to be naughty, as I spent a great deal of effort pretending to be the good girl. Was Granny suggesting that Roddy Fusswell had not, but wished he had, killed Mrs. Eversham? He was still very high on my list of suspects. As soon as we were home, Granny went to have an overdue afternoon lie-down. She needed a little nap, didn't she? I hastily bundled my coat into the hall closet and hurried toward the staircase, eager to record the clues I'd been gathering inside my head. "Miss," Sally called from the back hallway, "there's a letter come for you." She waved the envelope. "The postman's given up knocking on the front door and only ever comes to the kitchen." Marjorie, back from her honeymoon. I knew that script as well as I knew my own, though mine was never so tidy. "Thank you, Sally. Did Mummy get one too?" "Yes, miss." So her sister had gotten married and gone off on her honeymoon. And in those days, it took a long time to travel, so they would be gone for a while. And so I guess she has come back and sent a letter now to her sister and her mom. I did not bother looking for the letter knife. Climbing the stairs to my room, I peeled off the seal with my fingernail. So some of your moms may have one, or maybe you've seen your dad. It's a letter opener, but they called them letter knives then. And it looks like a knife, but it doesn't like cut things. It just cuts the paper, and you slide it down in the edge of the envelope, and then you rip upwards, and it just rips that envelope right apart, and then you pull it out easily. So here's the letter. Ready? Friday. Dear Aggie, thank you for the letter and the darling drawing of Tony with his enormous lamb bone. It was waiting when we arrived home from our wedding travels, which was perfectly splendid. Your spelling is still atrocious, one of the drawbacks of Mummy thinking you shouldn't go to school. I am sitting in my morning room, sending you the warmest of best wishes for the Mermaid Room concert this evening. By the time you receive this note, you will be looking back at your poetry recitation with relief and triumph. Congratulations, Missy. So they must call her Missy. It's Marjorie is her name, but she signed it Missy. I paused. My last letter to Marjorie had been written before I'd found Mrs. Eversham. How speedily one's view of the world can change, especially when one has gazed coolly into the face of death. This is back to the letter. James's niece Lucy is still chattering about meeting you at the wedding. She says it was the most wonderful day of her life so far. It was certainly one of my favorite days as well, but of course, I was the bride. I'm so pleased that you and Lucy got on well. James and I hope that you and Mummy and Granny Jane will all come to spend Christmas with us at Owl Park. Lucy will be here and the rest of James's family, as well as various other friends and odd acquaintances who have nowhere else to go. Do say you're as excited for this as I am. Many hugs, dear Agatha Pagatha. She must call her that. Agatha Pagatha. Your loving sister, Marjorie. So let's go back to congratulations, Missy. Oh, I think she was calling her that, kind of like you'd say sweetie or honey. Congratulations, Missy. Okay, so that's not what they call her, because she signed it, your loving sister, Marjorie. My bad. I held the letter for a moment, closing my eyes against the sting of tears. I missed my sister dreadfully, but I missed Papa even more. And Marjorie had just reminded me of that. It was Papa who had used my name to make up a silly variation of the nursery rhyme. Agatha Pagatha, my black hen, she lays eggs for gentlemen. She laid 6 and she laid 7, and one day she laid 11. I screwed up my face as hard as ever I could, teeth biting into my lip. Go away, tears. Think of something else. As I tucked the letter back into its envelope, I saw that Marjorie had scrawled a postscript on the reverse side of the page. My goodness, Aggie, I've just had a note from Granny Jane telling me about Rose Eversham's mother. This is the most dreadful news. I shall write to Rose at once, but am horror-stricken that you made such a grim discovery. You are a brave girl. Best love, M. My fame as a body finder was spreading without me doing a thing. The harder task was finding the murderer. Being a clever sleuth, was far more deserving of fame than simply walking into a room where a corpse was waiting to be found under the legs of a piano. And being a clever sleuth involved taking notes. I'd come up here to collect my writing book. So where was it? Not in the drawer of the table at my bedside, where I usually kept it, not amongst the cushions on the window seat where I like to write poetry, not on the bed, not under the bed. Come to think of it, where had I last seen it? My mind flew to the dreadful scene in the mermaid room. Dr. Chase on his knees next to the corpse of Rose's mother. Miss Mary Ann, ashen-faced, wringing her hands. Charlotte hissing at me to hurry back out. Me paying no heed but scurrying over, almost close enough to step on poor Miss Eversham, to retrieve my notebook from where Rose had lain it on top of the piano the evening before. Then what? Charlotte had dragged me away, down the stairs and into Mr. Dillon's shop to await the police. Eureka! I had slipped the book into my dance bag and not given it another thought. How much brain cell friction had assisted in remembering one small detail? I pulled my dance bag from the bottom of my wardrobe and fumbled to open the clasp. Hooray! My dear tattered writing book quietly waiting to be of service. I rifled through looking for my most recent entry. A loose page fell out and fluttered to the floor. Not my writing. Not writing at all, but words assembled from the cut-out bits of printed text. Look. I'll read it to you, but see, that's what fell out, is a piece of paper with all that on it. This is why Rose wanted the book, isn't it? Remember, she wanted, please bring it to me right away. This is why she wanted this. Let's see what it says. Please be informed that you are not the first child of your parents' union. They hid a baby before you were born. Is this a secret you can live with? Meet at Torrey Abbey, 5 o'clock Sunday. Should we not inherit together? From Fair Play. So do you think this is to Aggie about her parents, which wouldn't make sense because she knows she wasn't the firstborn or the only child because she has a sister, right? So this must have been written to Rose Eversham, who thinks she's the only child and was getting ready to inherit everything. Does that make sense? I turned the page over. Nothing was written or pasted on the reverse. I read it a second time, and then again. My face hotter and hands more trembly every time. Who had written this? Clearly, it was not meant for me. My parents had Marjorie first and then me. No confusion about that. There could never be another because poor Papa was dead. I've gotta get rid of that notification. It's driving me crazy. So who was it meant for? And how did it come to be inside my writing book? Despite being signed Fair Play, it whiffed of menace more than good intentions, as well as a very big secret. Each letter had been cut from other texts and then made into new words. Most of them were quite small and must have come from newspapers. Upper and lowercase letters were mixed up so the sentences dipped in rows and crooked lines. I examined it so closely I could smell the paste and ink. The author had gone to great lengths to hide his or her identity. I gave myself a shake. I was holding a real clue to a real murder. It simply must be connected. There could not be two ominous mysteries happening at the same time. Begin at the beginning, I told myself. Proceed logically, as Hector would. When I'd passed the notebook to Rose at the concert, there had been no letter inside. Between then and the moment when I reached over the corpse to retrieve it, this letter had been slipped between its pages. By who? Was the writer also the hider? Was the recipient the one who wished it to stay a secret? Were there two identities to discover? Or three? Was my notebook meant to be a post box of some sorts? Or was the insertion an accidental one? Neither of these ideas made sense. My name was boldly written across the front, so no error could be made. Rose was likely the last person to touch the notebook, since I'd picked it up from where she'd put it down. If Rose had slipped a paper into the book while reading my poem, the audience would have seen her. And later, when we'd all gone home, by then there'd be no reason for secrecy. She could have simply put it into her handbag. My head swam. How would I ever sort it out? Just then came 2 taps on the door and then another. Charlotte's usual knock. I crammed the letter back into my notebook and slammed it shut. Miss Aggie? Charlotte poked her head around the door. My heart pounded as if I'd raced a pony rather than hidden a piece of paper. Hello? I squeaked. We're all at table, said Charlotte. And you are not. I flattened a palm on the cover of my precious book. Coming! 10 seconds! Remember, it was, tea time. She'd forgotten. As soon as she had gone, I flew to the window seat and tucked the book under a cushion. One thing was certain, I would not show the letter to Charlotte. She had been so rude about Hector's powdery paper. Offering a second clue would be begging for ridicule. She'd never be an ally in a murder hunt, I knew. I rushed along the hallway and down the stairs without pausing to smooth my hair or catch my breath. Deceit was an energetic pastime. How did criminals manage to live their lives? Granny Jane shot me a stern look when I scurried into the dining room, hot-faced and mumbling an apology. Charlotte passed a plate of cold tongue with sliced bread and butter. I loathed tongue. It looked so much like tongue. If I had known that an outing would result in the discourtesy of being late, said Granny Jane. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. Well, Granny Jane could be so unreliable. One minute she was a person's best friend, and with the next breath she turned brusque and unhelpful. Best not to risk showing her the letter either. Granny Jane, in the wrong mood, might toss it into the fire, or worse, send it straight to Inspector Locke. What an insult that would be to my sleuthing abilities. Are you quite well, darling? Mummy reached over to feel my forehead. You look flushed. I'm fine. I nibbled on bread, spread thickly with butter. You haven't touched your tongue, said Mummy. A growing girl needs excellent meat along with improving grains and lots of fresh air. Charlotte, come with me now to speak with Cook. We'll devise a restorative diet. I'm terribly concerned since Agatha's upsetting day on Saturday. I did not protest as they made their way out. It made Mummy feel better to feed me bran and cod liver oil, but I wouldn't share the leather with them either. With her either. It was too easy to worry Mummy, and a worried Mummy was a terrible thing to behold. I had never done it on purpose, of course, but I squirmed to remember the time or two when I had caused distress by accident, like when fat little Tony had fallen into the creek last summer and couldn't get himself out. I had waded to the rescue and come home caked in creek slime. Mummy had swooned, actually swooned. If she saw the menacing letter, she would agree with Charlotte and forbid the very thing that I wanted most, to solve the puzzle of Mrs. Eversham's murder. Has hot cocoa in a hotel spoiled you for proper food? Said Granny. I recall a fervent promise that food at home would be eaten without complaint. I didn't know it'd be tongue, I muttered. Granny unfolded the Torquay voice. How disappointing, she murmured. Mr. Fibley has not filed a story this evening despite his promise in the morning edition. Too busy making tea with one of the prime suspects, I presume? Is there nothing about the death of Mrs. Eversham? Only a statement from Inspector Locke. The investigation continues, etc. Anyone with pertinent information should notify the constabulary at once, etc. I stared at the nasty little bumps on the slab of tongue before me. Oh, this is just grossing me out. If only Tony were allowed into the dining room, I could slip him a treat. Unbeknownst to the police, or to cocky Mr. Fibley, Hector and I were holding 2 pieces of pertinent information. A paper dusted with possibly lethal powder, and a threatening, anonymous letter. But Charlotte had roundly scolded us for thinking we had something to offer the police. She forbidden me from further involvement. It seemed prudent to follow her instructions and refrain from passing along clues just yet. Who said a girl could not keep a secret? May I please be excused from the table? I said. You may, said Granny Jane, but do not imagine that putting a serviette over your plate disguises the uneaten tongue. So Granny could tell she hadn't eaten her food, right? Finally released and back in my room, I kicked off my shoes. I pulled my notebook from under the cushion of the window seat and sat with my feet tucked up, peering through the window into the black beyond. Nightfall happened so quickly in the autumn. Above the branches of the little woods, a single light burned in Rose Eversham's bedroom. Here she goes daydreaming again. The girl's fingers danced in agitation on the soft peach-covered coverlet. She watched the candles splutter, imagining that she would never sleep again. So heavy with sorrow was her heart. Or perhaps, here's her next stab at it, the girl's dark eyes flashed in the candlelight, bright with barely contained exultation. Until Saturday, she had been flung like a feather on the wind by the whims of an angry woman. But no longer. She was now queen of her own domain, rich and pretty, happily sharing the castle with her dear Auntie Em. Auntie Em. I arrived with a thunk at a nagging recollection, one I had been trying to ignore. My notebook was usually of little interest to adults. Mummy said fondly that I was a poet, and Janie Grain occasionally suggested that I record the correct spelling of a newly learned word. But no one had ever asked to read what I had composed until yesterday. Remember, Marianne was so intent on getting it. Remember? It gets us to chapter 14. See how long it is? Oh, it's a long one. So we'll have to stop here today. Oh, it's a really long one. So prepare. Tomorrow will be a nice long one. Okay? Into chapter 13. Bye.